Hi, I'm Mike the Monarch. Every year, millions of lepidopterans like me in the species Danaus plexippus migrate between the Midwest and one single forest in the Michoacan state of Mexico. And every year, thousands of humans in the species Homo sapiens migrate between all the states in Mexico and countries farther south, and the Midwest, west, south, and northeast of our country. It's a tough trip for people and butterflies. There are lots of risks and hazards along the way for both. Today we're going to talk about people and insects traveling across national borders and what we can do to help both of them on their way. Good morning, and welcome to this place of comfort and challenge, of the familiar and the surprising. I'm Dave Lloyd, a member of the congregation, and Julia Beckman and I will be leading the service. The text services are provided by Gene Schaefer, and Alex Dvorak, sorry. This summer, if the weather is not as brutally hot as it is today, all our services will be outside at the Conversation Circle on the church lawn. As you know, summer services start at 10 o'clock. Let's be extra polite to anyone who shows up at 10:30 today. There's always a lot going on around the church, and you can read all about it in News and Notes, which arrives in your inbox every Friday. If you'd like to receive news and notes, you can go to the church's website, hinsdaleunitarian.org, and click on the Connect button at the top of the home page, or stop at the visitors table in the living room at the back of church, and we can get your email address. I have an announcement, and that is that some of us are marching in the 4th of July parade in Brookfield. My wife Suzanne and I are among the charter members of the Brookfield Native Plants Club, and we have a parade unit with Mike the Monarch, people dressed as milkweed seeds, people carrying flowers, and a big banner. The parade starts at 10 o'clock on Friday the 4th and goes for a couple of hours. And there's a big party with food and drink at the end of the parade. I'm not just suggesting this as a fun thing to do. I'm also asking for help. We need people to carry flowers and throw milkweed seeds, real ones, not people dressed as milkweed seeds, in the air. Come and see me after service if you're interested.
We light our chalice today, the symbol of our church and denomination, with these words, and if you can remember them, say them with us.
They're in the order of service.
In the light of truth and the warmth of love, they're in the order of service, sorry. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share.
This is the time in the church service for a story for all ages. Well, today I present a story about all ages. But first, another announcement. Speaking of flowers, if you have a patio, deck, or balcony, but no garden, but you want some plants around your house, see Dennis Seegett after the service for some free plants. He's downstairs in the Alice Warren room. Now, the story for all ages. This time I present a story about all ages. Last week my wife Suzanne and I were on vacation and we went to a cider tasting at a cider production place. I was sitting at the tasting bar with some young people on my right and some other young people on my left. And at some point one of the young people on my right started explaining that millennials can actually be divided into two groups. The older ones who started life with no computers and got computers in their teens, and the younger ones who grew up with computers from day one. And as the cranky old man in the group, I said, that's what the man is trying to do. Divide us all up, all of us, by age, sex, race, even dividing ages into smaller and smaller subgroups, just to divide us so the man can hold on to power. And the young guy on my left said, yeah, the only war is a class war. And the young people on the right were all nodding and agreeing. And I thought, I've roused enough rabble today. My work is done here. It's a story about all ages. Now, put your feet flat on the floor. Close your eyes if you like. And this is a beautiful time of the year to imagine a warm evening, because it does cool off some by the end of the day. And if you're careful, and if you look, and if you listen, you can hear the winds in the trees because the traffic is down. And if you're lucky, you can see lightning bugs. The world we live in has insects that light up. It's not for us. It wasn't done for us, but we get to watch them. Now leave those lightning bugs alone. Open your eyes, come back to the space. We enter this space bringing with us joys, concerns, challenges, and blessings. If you have something either weighing or dancing on your heart this morning, you're invited to come up and drop a stone. If you wish, you can say a name, a word, or a short phrase to share your intention. And I get to start. We weren't at church last week because we were on vacation, and we went back to where Suzanne and I honeymooned 25 years ago. One of the the best decision I ever made.
I'm Dave May. I'm the church treasurer. Tomorrow is the last day of the church fiscal year, so check your pledge donation reports and see where you are. And if you owe anything for the 24-25 year on your pledge, this would be a good time to send us a check. And then Tuesday is the first day of the next fiscal year. And we had wonderful response on pledges for next year. And so the sooner the better you send us some of your pledge money. Thank you very much.
Quick question, Dave. If somebody makes their donation online or has made it in the last week, is that going to be captured for the deadline tomorrow?
Yeah, it will. And if you intended it for next time, just send our bookkeeper an email and let her know.
My name is Megan, and I have a sorrow that's kind of turned into a joy. Tuesday the 19th, I got a phone call from my new boss, and said I've been terminated from my job after 22 years at a children's dyslexia center, which is a sorrow, but then it turns into a joy because I get my afternoons and evenings back.
I'm Kathy, and I have a sorrow. My friend is losing his memory fast.
I'm Darren. I have a joy. We're going back to cooking for Beds Plus, July 26th. So look for that announcement.
My joy is I got a new puppy.
What's What's the puppy's name?
Roger.
Roger? Excellent. Oh, sure. Much better name than Roger. You got it? Thank you very much. And one more stone for all the thoughts that couldn't be shared today and for our place in the world. Earlier, I talked about the monarch migration, where millions of butterflies make the trip between Mexico and the Midwest and back every year. The mystery is how they do it. When birds migrate, they make the trip over and over again, and the children follow their parents, and that's how they learn the way. But monarchs don't make the trip over and over again. Monarchs don't live more than a few weeks or months. So the monarch who came up this spring, it's that monarch's great-great-grandchildren who will make the trip back. There are several generations of monarchs in a year. No individual monarch has ever made the trip before. So how do they find their way? No one knows. And you probably know that the number of monarchs are way down. Sorry, numbers of monarchs are way down. I don't want anybody to say that I'm using the wrong verb form. The population fluctuates greatly from year to year, but over the last 50 years, the trend is definitely downward. They compute the number of monarchs by measuring the area of the forests where the monarchs spend their winter in Mexico. And where there used to be 500 acres, that occupied space is not only about 20 acres. It's that serious. And a lot of other insect populations are down as well. I remember growing up that if we were driving on a trip, especially at night, every time we stopped for gas, we'd have to clean the windshield of all the dead bugs. You just don't see that anymore. And it's not because the cars are somehow more aerodynamic. The bugs just aren't there. I remember growing up that we had lightning bugs all summer, and we used to catch them and put them in jars and smear the glowy stuff on our hands. Sorry, lightning bugs. Now you don't see many at all. I remember growing up that we had vacant lots in our neighborhood, which we called prairies. And there would be all kinds of grasshoppers and crickets and caterpillars. Not anymore.
So Dave, this is really alarming news. What does climate change have to do with all this?
Well, climate change has a lot of effects. First, it affects the ranges of animals, including insects, and host plants. As areas get hotter, plants and insects that used to live there just can't live there anymore. Some can move northward, but it's a really difficult problem. With climate change, there's more fires. You know, we've seen the fires in Canada this year. You remember a few years ago, thousands, millions of acres in Australia burned up. A small fire in a small area will renew the forest there, but when you wipe out a whole state worth of vegetation, you lose all the insects there for years. Storm intensity is greater due to climate change, and of course, that destroys plants and insects. Sea level rise removes habitat that's on the wetlands near the shore that all sorts of insects and other arthropods love to live in. There are more droughts, which of course affects plants, affects animals, and the reduction of cold habitat. There are a lot of insects that live in a particular cold place. That's not there anymore.
That seems bad enough, but and we're all concerned about pollution, does that have an impact too?
Well, we notice pollution, of course, you know, and in breathing and in our water quality, of course, it affects insects probably more because they're little tiny things, and if they had hearts, they'd be beating really, really fast. They intake the pollution much more than we do, and the toxic chemicals affect them.
Well, I'm sure there are lots of people who live around us in the urban areas who are really trying to do something. Is that good, or what's happening in the urban areas?
Well, it's all up to us to make changes. In lots of, and you know, our areas are pretty well built up. Once in a while you see a house being infilled here or at the edge of the suburb, but we know that in countries all over the world, there are increasingly large cities where there used to be towns and villages or farmland. You know, suddenly there's 1 million, 3 million people living in a place that used to be grasslands and forest lands. That urbanization, the increase in population, takes away all that habitat.
But there's still a lot of open land out there. We have a lot of farmland, places where the insects can live, right?
Farmland used to host a lot of insects because farmers would have wasteland that they didn't farm because it just wasn't profitable, or around all the farm plots, they would have some weeds that they didn't plow because it stopped the view from passing cars and it kept animals from, but all that's gone. Farmers are now, in order to increase their profitability, plowing fence row to fence row. So those, and if you look in pictures of England, you know, where they used to have the hedgerows that are so iconic for England, those are all being dug up so they can farm more land. All those hedgerows with all the different species used to host lots of insects. So farming practices are aimed at killing insects.
Insecticides too? Do they still use insecticides out in the farms?
Oh, of course. And anything that they use on pest insects, of course, it doesn't have a little sign, monarch butterfly, don't drink this. So insecticides will kill anything. They don't have any that are specific to this beetle or that beetle.
So do these insects have other natural enemies, or are we the only ones?
Oh, sure. There are a lot of invasive species. People travel around the world. You've heard about the emerald ash borer, the boll weevil back, 70, 80 years ago. The Dutch elm disease was spread by an insect. And there are invasive plant species that come here. People bring them here for good reasons or as hitchhikers on shipping containers. Animals here, including insects, don't recognize them as food. So if you have a whole field that used to be a mix of flowers and grasses, and now it's all one plant that nobody likes, that's less food for insects. There are a lot of threats to insects. So what can we do? The good thing is that insects lay a lot of eggs, and they produce a lot of young. That's why the population fluctuates so much. There's one bad year and the population tanks, but it rebuilds the next year because insects produce so many young. We can increase the population of bees and butterflies and other pollinators by taking steps at home. There's not much we can do to change farming practices or the growth of the world population, but we can make homes for butterflies and other insects in our homes and neighborhoods. Suzanne and I have probably the wildest yard of anybody I know, about the wildest yard in our town. Most of our neighbors who talk to us like it, but the ones who aren't talking to us, we don't know. You don't have to go that far. If you want to turn a part of your yard into a monarch haven, that's great. Native plants are great, and there are a lot of places to get them. But if you're going to do just one thing for butterflies, make a circle around the base of a tree and plant native plants there. A lot of butterflies lay eggs in trees, and the caterpillars hatch and fall to the ground. And if it's grass or non-native ornamental plants, it might as well be green concrete. Just plant a few native plants at the base of your trees, and you will make a big difference. And this applies to parkway trees. The village is not going to bust you if you have a neat, well-bordered bunch of coneflowers or wild bergamot or asters at the base of a parkway tree. And the other easy thing you can do is not to rake the leaves out of your flower beds. Rake the lawn all you want, but leave the leaves in the flower beds. You'll get lightning bugs. I sat out on my patio and watched for the lightning bugs to come out, and some nights they all light up at the same time. It's like they all punched in and got to work at the same moment. One great benefit of creating a bit of butterfly habitat in your yard is that people walk by and see it, and they think that, well, maybe that's not so bad. You don't look like that Lloyd family. You have a nice, neat native garden. I've had people walk past my house and say they like the native plants and they want to try it too. Be an example to others and encourage others to help butterflies and other pollinators, and you'll multiply your effect on the world. Oh, and you can go out in public and encourage lots of people to plant native plants. I understand that there's a parade coming up this next week, and you can do just that. See me after church, and we'll talk about the 4th of July parade. If you're interested in other ways to protect and multiply monarchs and other butterflies, including contributing a few bucks to expand the monarch forest in Mexico, you can check the 2 websites at the bottom of the order of service. Helping save insects can be a part of a whole lifestyle that is happier and more spiritual. And it goes beyond just a few actions. It goes into a whole philosophy. Here's a quote from The Pond Lovers, a book by Gene Logsdon, who is a farmer who writes books to encourage people to get back in communication with the land and with all nature. He says this: "There is a greedy, obese behemoth that threatens all our lives. It's the American economy. Quit feeding the monster. Stop buying all that stuff. Stuff we don't need. And if you do that, it would at least slow down the amount of polluted waste the behemoth produces." Now let's sing a hymn.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in hymn number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. Can you see it? We think it's on this. Singing congregation. We don't need that one yet.
As we heard earlier, it's the close of the church's fiscal year, and of course the church relies entirely on all our contributions. And we've been very generous this past year. People have been very generous with their pledges this year. It's the end of the week. You've spent all the money in your budget. There's probably extra folding money in your wallet. So don't hesitate to share it today. Let's say these words together. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It's what we share with one another, with people around us, and with all the world. Thank you in advance for your generosity.
The reading for today is called We Are Not Guests. It is by Miguel de la Torre. Am I a guest here? Here in this house? Are you? Are we guests here in this house? And whose house do we inhabit? In the small world of our lives, the borders between us, easements, fences, gates, hedges, serve to delineate, to separate us, to remind us of where my property begins and ends, where your property begins and ends. If you cross over, you are a trespasser or a guest in my house. You've worked to own this small plot of land and the house erected on it. You've claimed it. It is now part of yourself, your definition of self, your identity. If I cross over your fences, I am a trespasser or a guest in your house. What does it mean then that in 1845, the United States crossed over into Mexico and took half of that country, took land, resources, labor? Was the U.S. a trespasser, a guest? Are there to be no consequences for taking what does not belong to you? Should we simply forget whose house we inhabit? To speak of hospitality in immigration often erases historical context, the actions of the past that have led us step by step into this current predicament. This professor has written, perhaps it might be more accurate to speak of the responsibility of restitution rather than the virtue of hospitality. Hospitality in this case implies that the house belongs to us, that the land, the resources that are a part of this house is ours, and we who now live here are being virtuous in our willingness to share. It erases the history that would have us remember that those who cross the border today, those choosing to brave the harsh conditions of the desert, those who face the possibility of death, imprisonment, deportation, criminalization, are doing so because the U.S. once crossed their borders to extract their resources and labor. It is for them a matter of survival. It is for the U.S. a matter of restitution. The prospect of restitution is scary, though. Where do we begin? With Mexico? With Native Americans? With territories? With the descendants of those who were enslaved? How do we acknowledge and address the complexities of our history, present and, if we're not conscious, future of dominance? What would right relationships look like? What conditions and considerations would make it restitution possible? And for us, Unitarian Universalists, what would it mean for us to shake off the idea of hospitality as a central principle that is often attached to immigration and delve into the concept of restitution? Whose house do we inhabit? For we are not hosts, we are not owners, nor are we guests. What then is our responsibility? That ends the reading.
In my first week in law school, as I remember it, a professor told the class we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking the law will be fair or that it will make sense. And the area that makes this most clear is criminal law. Many sections of the criminal code are based on an emotional or political response to a crisis or tragedy. It's so important to look tough on crime. Our criminal law is aimed solely at revenge, not at preventing crime, not at persuading people not to commit crime, or getting them prepared for a life where they don't need to do crime. You know, rehabilitation. And immigration policy works the same way. We need to show that we're tough on illegal immigration. And the only alternative presented is open borders, whatever that's supposed to mean. There's nobody in the political system, nobody, that has the courage to come up with a process that gets all the stakeholders together. Companies and farms that want cheap labor, families who want health care for their sick and aged relatives that they can actually afford, people who come here to pursue the American dream, students who can't get scholarships because their parents brought them here as infants, people who were born here but because of the tint of their skin color or their accent or the fact that their last name ends with a Z, they have to live in fear. And people who are legitimately worried about too large numbers of people coming into this country. They're stakeholders too. Get all those stakeholders and develop a policy that actually works. Here's something I read in an article by a lawyer named Bob Glaves. There are two fundamental problems with our current immigration system that lead to many others. First, the laws that dictate how many people we allow in legally are arbitrarily set and generally bear no relation to the realities of our economy or what is happening in the world. For many years now, the system has lacked sufficient legal channels to function efficiently and effectively. Second, with few exceptions, the only available penalty for violations of these flawed laws is deportation. A lucky few can get a deferred status that allows them to stay temporarily or longer term with limited rights. But the system does not allow for the range of penalties that even our criminal justice system allows. We don't throw everyone in jail who violates our criminal laws. There are fines, probation, and other penalties depending on the severity of the offense, so that the punishment fits the crime. Not so for immigration. And many of our current problems stem from that glaring omission. Now, Julia, you've looked into this some, and by the way, we were really assisted in preparing this by Linda Rio, a member of our church, who is a lawyer and who runs a nonprofit that gets lawyers to volunteer to work on immigration cases. Thank you very much, Linda. When people come here as immigrants, besides going through everything else, what do they face from the people around them when they're here?
Oh, they're more vulnerable to abuse and fraud. Examples include victims of domestic violence or trafficking, workers who work in unsafe working conditions, or they're paid below market wages by unscrupulous employers, and they're consumer fraud victims, and sometimes English is a barrier too, because some of them come not knowing English. Their perpetrators prey on their vulnerability and then hold their immigration status over them to intimidate them from seeking any legal help.
And you keep reading about families being broken up. You know, the
right.
head of the family is grabbed and sent to a center. What happens? What happens to the family?
And the children may be citizens because they were born here. So they grab the parents or the caregivers, and they can be detained or deported, and what's going to happen to the children? It moves a formerly stable family into instability that has a number of consequences. They might lose their home. They might be evicted because they have no income. There are guardianship. Who's going to take care of these children and their custody issues? And there are other similar legal problems that are caused by breaking up the family. And they totally lose contact with their parents and their caregivers.
And this is not meant to sound like a political sarcasm, but isn't there a court system? Don't we have due process in this country?
It's been under discussion lately, for sure. But the last time I checked, yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes, but the immigration court system for years has been understaffed, and Congress has failed to pass a law, as was mentioned earlier, any kind of to improve things. So they face lengthy, unnecessarily backlogs. So many people are now in proceedings because so many people have come here, and some of them don't pose a threat to public safety. A recent Chicago Sun-Times article talked about how this problem plays out in Chicago, significantly slowing down the process for people who should be deported, those criminals that we keep hearing about, as well as people who have legal grounds to stay here and they're unnecessarily detained or held back in the process. It's really a terrible situation.
Well, and people who have, and whether they're here legally, documented or not, doesn't this cause them to fear the authorities? I mean, what if there's crime? What are they going to do? Talk to the police?
It's really hard for them. They can be very afraid to report crimes or cooperate with police, so it makes it hard for police too. They can't find out the truth about anything if people won't talk to them. And of course, they have the fear of being reported to immigration authorities. They make the job of local law enforcement more difficult, and it makes the entire community less safe. And I would add that, fortunately, in Illinois, we are a sanctuary state, and Chicago is a sanctuary city. So the police there are not supposed to ask people about their immigration status.
How do people get lawyers? I mean, if they're sent to a detention center, just grabbed, kidnapped off the street,
Yeah.
what do you do?
It's for people like Linda Rio to help out, and thank goodness there are lawyers, but thousands of people who pose no threat to public safety, as you said, they're sent to El Salvador, they're sent to Louisiana, wherever, makes getting access to counsel so much more challenging than if they were just released into the community, which is what used to happen, with alternative forms of detention that have been proven effective. Those alternative forms are effective in ensuring compliance with the immigration court process, but here we are.
And one more thing, I do a lot of work that gets me in contact with high school teachers and high school students. And a teacher once told me, the kids who are there, who are, the best achievers, but they're not documented. And he went in some direction, I can't remember. Is this something that you've looked into?
Yeah, and I have personal knowledge of high school students in the Community High School District 99, where there are kids there who are really bright, they're high achievers, they would otherwise qualify for a range of public and private scholarships and awards, but they're not eligible because they're not legal. Their parents brought them here as young children, so they weren't born here. So they're not citizens either. And they've never attained citizenship, and as most of you know, it takes years to attain citizenship.
So what can we do? We could spend the rest of the day going into all the actions we can take, but they've been collected in places. And one very important resource is at IllinoisImmigrationInfo.org. That URL is on your order of service. They have numerous opportunities for people like you and me to help make lives better for people who are just trying to get to where the rest of us already are.
Find the closing words. There they are. Our closing words are, for the chalice extinguishing, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of its truth, the warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world. And now we have a little more challenging hymn for you. which is Follow the Drinking Gourd, which is on page 152. And we've got some accompaniment on the screen. We hope.
Please rise in body or spirit.
It's a very appropriate hymn, I'll just tell you that. Might add, this is actually a legitimate song that the slaves did sing, and that's how they guided themselves. The drinking gourd would be a hollowed out gourd that would be hanging in front of a home, and the escaping slave would understand that that was a safe place to go. So it's a very appropriate hymn. Thank you for singing it.
I saw a video of Jon Stewart from The Daily Show a couple of weeks ago. He takes questions from the audience, and they put some of them on social media. He was asked some question about how a young person, maybe LGBT plus or an immigrant, can hold on to the American dream. And he first rolled his eyes and said, yeah, good question. But he collected his thoughts and said this: hold on to that dream. Don't stop working for that dream. The arc of history turns toward justice, but it doesn't turn on its own. It takes people like you and me to turn it. And there are a lot of people on the other side trying to turn it back. And we're not going to let them. Thank you, everyone, for attending on this beautiful day. Join us for snacks, coffee, and things to eat downstairs. If you're new here, pick up a green mug. That way we'll know to greet you. Thank you, everyone.